What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the Saturday afternoon edition of the Stochastic NHL Strategy Show. I'm your host, Josh Harris. If you can hear that silence, no one is around with me today. I am not overstimulated. We are excited for this six-gamer. Sometimes being a parent is just wild. Yesterday was one of those days. I am glad it's just me and you talking, because I got some wild videos of Spencer running around like a chicken with his head cut off during the show yesterday. Interesting slate last night. Toronto didn't do anything. The Devils kind of did, but kind of didn't. Like, if I know Hughes and Bratt had a decent game, and Nico Hischier and Stefan Nason had a lot of shots on goal. If the Nason line got one goal there, besides the Timo Meier unassisted, like, they probably would have been optimal because Nason had like 426 shots on goal. It didn't really matter because Minnesota just absolutely truck stick whoever. I already forgot who they played, but I was sleeping already. I think it was the Ducks. But yeah, you needed the Wild. Awful take by me. I mean, I stand by my take. It just happens that it's a result-oriented awful take, and I don't really go with result-oriented takes. That's just bad business. This six-gamer is pretty wild. There are some serious heavy hitters on this slate. Looking forward to breaking down. Tyler's on time for once. He's really trying to get some WrestleMania tickets. But what's going on, Cliffy? You look very festive today.
Yeah, I've got my Macho Man Christmas sweater on. Feeling good about this slate. I like the games. I like the matchups. I know there are some lopsided matchups, obviously, but I think that always makes for interesting DFS opportunities. You know, last night you had Minnesota. You did like the whole top line. They each had 3-point bonuses. That's just the way that goes. Tonight's a little bit interesting because there are some key injury notes that we're going to have to go through game by game. There are some important players coming back. There are some important players missing the game tonight. Makes for some wild line combinations, some cheap line combinations, some expensive line combinations. So I like the slate. I like, most of the matchups, especially when you look at some of the prices of some of the lines that even from the teams in bad matchups. So I think this is a nice little six-gamer we have ahead of us.
Yeah, and last night the Wild had one of the highest totals on the slate. Tonight they have the lowest. It's tied with the Blues, and there's some it's pretty crazy. Like, going into LA is just a meat grinder now. Like, you just do not want to go into LA. They're first by expected goals against per 60 minutes in the NHL. Like, they're just disgustingly good on the defensive end. So this is a fun little slate to break down. Let's start to break it down. Finding value going to be a challenge. There's a couple lines in the 12K range that we will definitely be talking about that stick out like a sore thumb. Whether they actually do stuff is another question, but looking forward to breaking it down. Again, just wanted to say thank you guys for being here. You took time out of your Saturday afternoon to be with us. We thank you for that. If you do want to go premium, you can click the link in the chat. Use promo code Stochastic15. That'll get you 15% off your first week or month of any Stochastic subscription. Still have about 4 hours before MMA lock tonight. Last pay-per-view of the year for the UFC. It is a good one. So if you are interested in playing MMA DFS, access to the Sims, click that link. Obviously, NHL. Got NFL tomorrow. But, yeah, excited to break this one down. Washington Capitals with a 3.2 total heading into Montreal. The Canadiens have a 2.8 total. Looks like Caden Goulet. Every time I hear Caden Goulet, I just think of Robert Goulet's skit from Saturday Night Live. When Will Ferrell's in that, I love it when you call me Big Papa. But yeah, anyway, that's just showing my age. But Washington beat Toronto last night in Toronto. They're now in Montreal. I'm not super up on my Canada geography, but I can't imagine that's a very long trip. So bunch of young fellas on the team. Anyway, Laine scored another disgusting goal the other night on the power play. That line at 5-on-5 is a mess. But what do you expect from Patrick Laine 5-on-5 line? Washington, I would imagine, coming off a win in Toronto, they were going to keep the same lines, which are Strome, Wilson, Protas, McMichael, Dubois, Radish, Eller, Mangiapane, LaPerriere. Montreal sticking with Field, Suzuki, Newhook, Laine, Slavkovsky, Doc. I'll start on the Montreal side. I actually don't mind Montreal one here. They still have a pretty good sample with Newhook up there. You get Caulfield and Suzuki on the top power play unit. Washington back-to-back on the road. They're not a very good defensive team by any stretch. They're leading the Metro. The Metro? Yeah, the Metro, which is insane considering the Metro is loaded. But, they're not great defensively. That Montreal one line has been pretty good offensively, and no one's really playing them on this slate. And I think that's the biggest driving factor of why I would consider them at 15,500. 3.4% top two stack, 1.8% projected ownership. The Canadians have a 2.8 total, and maybe Laine has something to do with that, but that's a pretty high total for Montreal. I kind of like Montreal 1 here. Montreal 2 is just getting run over at 5-on-5. I think if you're doing some sort of like Suzuki Caulfield stack and you want to leave off Newhook and add in Laine, I think that's what I would do to get exposure to Laine. Laine 1 off is fine, but like I am not stacking Montreal 2. That line is a mess, which is why I have a lot of interest in McMichael, Dubois, Radish. Now, you can say whatever you want about Taylor Radish, but Pierre-Luc Dubois and Connor McMichael have excellent numbers together this season, mostly with Tom Wilson, but, Taylor Radish, Chicago Blackhawks legend, if you will. They're 12,300, 2.3% top two, 6.1% projected ownership. You get McMichael on the top power play unit. This is an excellent power play spot. Is Dubois on the top unit now, or am I just making stuff up in my head?
No, well, he wasn't last night. They still went with Chychrun Carlson, so.
Oh, right. 2 defensemen. Yeah. I'm a mess, but I do like McMichael, Dubois, Radish a lot here. They're one of those filler lines that Clayton was asking about. It's going to be tough to find some value. This is one of those lines I think can be valuable at their price. Yes, they're negatively leveraged, but any line 12,300 worth a damn is going to be negatively leveraged. If you want to go to Washington 1, I think that's fine because you do get Strome and Wilson on the top power play unit. This is an excellent power play spot. So if you're interested in just getting power play exposure, I would do something like Strome, Wilson, McMichael, Strome, Wilson, Chychrun, Strome, Wilson, Carlson, something like that. But if you are spending up for the Colorados, for the Torontos, for the Edmontons of the world, I would consider Washington 2. I don't mind Montreal 1 and MME. Laine 1 off until, Laine 1 off is fine as well.
Yeah, I'll start on the Washington side. You mentioned how well McMichael and Pierre-Luc Dubois have played this season. Like most of those minutes have been with Tom Wilson, but they have played a handful of games now without Tom Wilson. And even in that sample, the numbers are still pretty good for that second Washington line. 3.5 expected goals for, 2.4 against. Only scoring 2.5 goals per 60, but shooting 6.7%. Like that shooting percentage obviously gets anywhere near league average. They'll be well above average scoring wise. We saw McMichael. I had to kind of laugh at that goal last night. I think one of the Toronto defenders put it off the ref and it bounced to the front of the net. McMichael put it in. It's a lucky goal for McMichael, but it also highlights what he does well is he lives within 20 feet of the net, right? Like that's how he finds all of his success. That's really where Montreal's defense has had a lot of problems. Even as the defense has improved over the last 4 or 5 weeks, clearing up those rebounds, covering guys that are in front so that they don't get tips and stuff like that. Like that's where Montreal really struggles, and I think that's where McMichael can do very well, and obviously him and Dubois have played well together. Like Dubois hasn't been great for DFS purposes, but he has. This is the second season in a row now. He's had pretty good tracking data, playmaking data. I was looking at some stuff from all three zones that does game-by-game tracking. And it's the second season in a row where he's done that. Only this season, instead of having Alex Laferriere shoot 6% next to him, he has Connor McMichael shooting about 3 times that, something like that. So I do like that second line, especially where they're going to get those second and third line matchups from the Canadians, because it's not just the top line from Montreal that is playing well, but like Caden Gooley is having a good defensive season when he's been healthy. That's been kind of the problem for him. He's missed, a few weeks now between illness and injury and all that. He's missed time, but when he's been healthy, he's been good defensively, and he's helps the team at 5-on-5, which is definitely where they need it. So it kind of takes me out of like Strome, Wilson, Protas as a stack. It would get me more towards the second Washington line, but it's also a good power play matchup for Washington, right? Montreal does take a lot of penalties still. They're at 3.4 times shorthanded per game over the last 31 days. It's the third most in the league and the most of any team on tonight's slate. So, and Washington's power play still been very good. We mentioned it yesterday without Alex Ovechkin. So I do like that Washington second line. I wouldn't hesitate to take out Radish, put in Strome, take out Dubois, put in Strome, like something like that. Focus maybe a little bit more on the power play guys, or add one of Chikrin or Carlson on defense or something. Get a little bit more power play exposure. But I really like Washington too here. Montreal, I have no interest in the Montreal depth per se. Montreal 1 would be my focus as well. You're right that they have played very well together. 3.5 expected goals per 60 minutes in about 80 minutes together. 3.8 actual goals. So it's not just that they're generating, they're also scoring. And they're not coming in with very much ownership. 1.8% ownership, 3.4% top 2 stack. Especially if you're 20 maxing or something, I think you definitely have to consider Montreal here tonight. Single entry, I think it's a little bit tougher because, you can't put them in with Edmonton. You can't put them in if you are playing expensive Toronto stacks or something like that. Colorado, certainly. But if you aren't, I think this is definitely one of the lines you have to consider. But just in general, I still do like the Washington side here, and it's the second line in specific.
Yeah. I am on board with that. If you want to fall on power play stack and get funky, no one will ever tell you no to some funk. What movie is that? PCU. PCU, great movie. Man, I'm showing my age today. Nashville Predators with a 2.7 total. Heading into Ottawa, the Senators have a 2.9 total. This game sucks. Maybe it's going to be a good hockey game, but from a DFS standpoint, I kind of want to throw myself down a flight of stairs. And I'll tell you why. Forsberg, Stamkos, Nyquist, 14,700, 11.3% top 2 stack percentage, 21.9% projected ownership. I'm sorry? 21.9%. Ryan O'Reilly's out. Steven Stamkos. I don't think Steven Stamkos has played center in Tampa for 3 years now. And he's playing a top line center in the NHL on a chalk line. Like I get it. Ottawa actually is better defensively. Yes, Hamonic blows, and that's just a scene. But Tkachuk, Batherson, Norris, as much as I want to powerbomb Norris through a table, that line in a very small sample has been pretty good defensively. I just Forsberg, good player. Stamkos, good player on the power play. Nyquist, very underrated player at this point in his career. Those three together do not make a good line. Steven Stamkos was a problem on the wing 5-on-5. He was dragging down everyone last year. He's dragging down Marchessault this year. Now he's going to center Forsberg and Nyquist, and they're coming at 22%. I'm out on that line. I just can't do it in single entry. I just can't. There's no way. I'd rather play Stützle, Giroux, Gaudette for $300 cheaper in the same game at a tenth of the ownership. That's just That's just me. Like I cannot. This feels like Nashville chalk from a few years ago. It just feels like bad chalk. It's not something I'm interested in. If you like them, play them. You play your guys. You want to one off Jonathan Marchessault? That's fine. I don't really have a ton of interest in Nashville here. The Ottawa side is a bit more interesting. Kachuk, Batherson, Norris, 19-7, 13.2% top two stack, 4.6% projected ownership. Like, they're okay. It's just there's Edmonton on the slate. There's Colorado on the slate. There's Matthews on this slate. There's Pittsburgh 1 on this slate. You know, it's just really, really hard to prioritize Ottawa 1 here at 19,700. I think in MME, getting over the field is something I would do on that line. It's not an elite power play matchup, but they are fully correlated. Their power play has been very good. For 19.7, I think in 20 max to 150 max, I'd be over the field. I don't know if I can prioritize them with some big boys on this slate in single entry. Ottawa 2 is interesting. Stützle, Giroux, Gaudette. Like Gaudette, when he was up with Brady Tkachuk, had awesome numbers together. He has a very good shot. Stützle's on the top power play unit. Giroux's going to play a ton of minutes. They're 14,400, 2.6% projected ownership. They're a little bit more expensive than the filler. You might be able to jam Edmonton in with them. I haven't tried if you punt goalie and defenseman, but like I don't mind them. Because once you it's not that like Nashville has a dangerous defensive line, but like once you get past the top line, it only gets worse. So I do have some interest in Stützle, Giroux, Gaudette as a filler.
Yeah, I will say I don't have interest in the Nashville top line, not as a full stack at over 20% ownership. I like everything you said about Stamkos is right. It's not that he played center in Tampa. He would take faceoffs in Tampa, right? But he wouldn't have the responsibilities of a center. Though that would go to Braden Point and Anthony Cirelli. There's a reason for that. Can't do it anymore. There is a reason why Team Canada got named and Stamkos wasn't even in consideration. And this is a guy going to the Hall of Fame. It's because there has been a steep drop off, especially at 5-on-5 over at least since the start of last year, if not before that. I have no interest in Nashville. One thing I will note, Nashville's top line. One thing I will note is they said Tommy Novak's going to be back in the lineup. We'll see where he slots in. I don't think it's going to be on the top line. But I think Nashville's also at a spot where, like, what does it matter? Like, they may as well try something new. This team's out of it. So we'll see what warmups look like. No interest in Nashville top line. The Nashville depth is a little bit more interesting to me. At the very least, I don't mind a Marchessault one-off here. He's still shooting the puck quite a bit. If and when those percentages turn around, there'll be a lot more goals behind it. I think that's fine. Him and Mark Jankowski don't have much of a sample together. The small sample, like they've only played a few games, but they've actually been pretty good in those few games together. If you want to go all the way down to the third line, if Novak is there and like a Novak Evangelista 2-man, because you're playing expensive Edmonton, expensive Colorado, something like that. The reason why I would be interested in that is because the bottoms, especially with Adam Gaudette on the second line, the bottom six from Ottawa is abysmally bad. Like, absolutely horrific. So far this season, whenever Adam Gaudette's played in the top six, the bottom six for Ottawa has a 29% goal share, 1.2 goals for, over 3 against per 60 minutes of 5-on-5. They are getting ran over. That's why I do have a little bit of interest if you're playing super expensive lines elsewhere to go look at a Novak Evangelista 2-man, a Jankowski, Zachary 2-man or something like that. Those things I think are in play if you are using expensive stacks. That's the only thing that interests me. Marchessault went off from the Nashville side. From the Ottawa side, I agree with you. It's Ottawa 2. I don't have any interest in the Ottawa. This isn't a good power play matchup for the Sens. Nashville does take their fair share of penalties. Ottawa's power play has certainly cooled over the last month after a very hot start. Nashville's penalty kill is generally good. Like, the one area where Nashville's special teams, power play and penalty kill, it's generally been good this year. All their problems have been at even strength. So not a great power play matchup. Totals under 3. We know how Josh Norris doesn't really help anybody. He did have a goal and assist the other night. He'll probably do that again here tonight. Made me look stupid, but it is Ottawa too. Like Stützle and Giroux, even without Tkachuk, 71 shot attempts, 3.1 goals per 60 minutes, and 115 minutes together. Stützle's on the top power play unit. Him and Giroux will probably lead the team in ice time because they do some penalty killing. You're right. Gaudette has looked very good in the top 6 whenever he's had a chance. I like Ottawa too here, especially against the Nashville second and third lines. Like they're just not going to be that good defensively. I think if the second line is anything, it's going to be good offensively. But at 14,400, like they're priced out of like expensive Colorado unless you go full punt everywhere. So it's kind of tough to fit them in. But Ottawa 2 is what I like best. But I don't mind the Nashville depth if you're looking for expensive stacks elsewhere.
Yeah, I saw a stat on X, and I forget who posted it. And I'm sorry I can't credit you, but it was the first time in NHL history a team has signed 2 40-goal scorers, Marchessault and Stamkos, and they lead the league in games with 2 or fewer goals.
It's crazy. Well, I was looking at it the other day with Nashville, and it's like I think it was 10 teams where their special teams goal differentials, so power play goal differential, penalty kill goal differential, of the top 10 teams, 9 of them averaged a .631 points percentage, like 106 point pace. And then Nashville, the 10th team, because they've had really good special teams, are on pace for 61 points. It's just absolutely wild how bad this team is at 5-on-5, even strength.
I mean, like, what did they expect? Well, never mind. We don't have we can do a dissertation on it next week or something. Colorado Avalanche, they 3.7 total. Heading into Detroit, the Stevie Yzermans have a 2.8 total. Detroit tried to trade for Trouba a second time yesterday. He ended up going to Anaheim. That's good for Detroit, but Detroit still sucks. Ville Husso in net again. He has a sparkling 877 save percentage on the season. Arden from Yonkers joining us late. It's all right. Frostback was on time, so the time continuum has evened out. We are okay. Colorado going McKinnon, Rantanen, Lehkonen. Ross the Boss Colton is back with Valerie Nichushkin and Casey Middlestat. That pushes Ivan, Logan O'Connor, and Joel Kiviranta to the third line. They're min-price, by the way. Their min-price third line going up against the bottom 6 of Detroit with Ville Husso in net. I'll just throw that out there in case you want to power play stack Edmonton. Not that I'm saying you should go play Colorado 3, but, Detroit going Larkin, Raymond, Rasmussen, fully correlated. Sorry, not fully correlated. DeBrincat, Kane, Comfer. This is interesting because we were discussing this game with Edmonton before the slate, and currently we have Colorado 1 for 25% projected ownership, and Edmonton 1 coming in at 17.2. Now Edmonton 1 is at home; they're $1,900 cheaper than Colorado 1. I'm not saying Jake's ownership is wrong here, but I don't think the machine really takes into account recency bias, and Edmonton just came alive and they absolutely just pounded the Blue Jackets. So I wouldn't be shocked to see that ownership flip throughout the day. As it stands, Colorado 1 is $2,000 cheaper than they were the other night, and they're in a much better matchup. Now, Larkin, Raymond, Rasmussen, fairly respectable defensively for a Detroit line. They will be going out a fair bit with Cider. Where's my pronunciation coach? I'll call him Moritz Cider and Simon Edvinsson. They have been legitimately good as a defensive pair this season. The problem is Ville Husso's in that, and they have a terrible penalty kill. So, like, what are we doing here? You get a 10% discount on Colorado from the other night. They're in a much better matchup. They're fully correlated. They have positive leverage. If you're in single entry, you're gonna have to make the choice between Colorado 1 or Edmonton 1. I have a slight lean to Edmonton 1 right now, but I think this is an excellent spot for Colorado 1. Colorado 2, they have a much better 5-on-5 matchup, but Colton's price, his price is still baked in that he was playing 27 minutes a night when the team only had McKinnon, Rantanen, and Colton. Like, they were the only guys playing. So, like, I don't know. They're a little expensive for me. If they're like 13-7 instead of 15-2, I'd have more interest because you're only getting you're only getting Nichushkin on the top power play unit. I think, Nichushkin one-off or even just throwing him on with McKinnon as a two-man makes some sense. Like, Colorado 2 would be in my MME mix, but the price is a little bit prohibitive for that second line. So this is a Colorado 1, Colorado power play game for me. On the Detroit side, like, I do have to consider Detroit 1 just from the fact that McKinnon, Rantanen, and Lehkonen have been very high event, and the Colorado goaltending is atrocious. It's like that's the only reason I'd consider Detroit 1. Like, I don't think I'll get there in single entry, but I'm not Xing them out if I was making 20 to 150 because they're a top line at 14,800. They're going to play a bunch of minutes, and they're going up against a line that's leaky defensively, and their goalie sucks. So, like, I'm not prioritizing Detroit on this slate. This is a Colorado game by a mile, but, like, I don't think you should X out Detroit just because of the Wings.
I might have already X'd out Detroit.
Here we go.
I'm going to start on the Colorado side. I'll start with that second line. I'll say I have no interest in full stacking the Colorado second line.
Yeah.
One, the coach said that they want to monitor Colton's minutes. Whether they actually do that, I think, is another story entirely. But he also said that they want to move him back to the top line at some point. So it's like, is he going to play a lot? And is he even going to play the whole game on that line? Like, that's a question that's going to have to be asked until he plays more minutes or they change lines or we get a few games of him not doing that. So it's just kind of tough to rely on it. The second thing is it's gone kind of under discussed. I'm not in tune with the Colorado day-to-day hockey media other than line combinations stuff. Casey Middlestat has been a horror show this year. Like, terrible. This is a guy I wasn't very high on when he was drafted, and he wasn't very good for a few years, and then really had a great, like, really good couple seasons in Buffalo, turning into a high-end playmaker. This is a guy whose on-ice goal rates are typically higher than his expected goal rates because he is such a good playmaker. He can set up his teammates for really good scoring chances, which creates higher shooting percentages than you would otherwise expect. He's not doing that this year. I was looking at the tracking data again from all three zones this morning. I think he's only tracked 6 of Middlestat's games. He doesn't have a single high danger pass at 5-on-5 in any of those games. He normally averaged about 2 every 60 minutes. He has 0 in 70. And if you look at the goal scoring and expected goals metrics for the whole season, that bears out too. He is dead last amongst Colorado forwards by expected goal differential this season. Like, think of all the forwards that team has cycled through this year, and Casey Middlestat is sitting dead last amongst them all. By goal differential, I think, by goal differential too, he's dead last. So think of Ivan, Kovalenko, Callum Ritchie, Chris Wagner, all these guys that nobody has ever heard of, and Casey Middlestat's been worse than all of them. And he's not even playmaking. That's the thing. It's not like he's just bad defensively, but still making plays. He's not doing anything. That worries me for that second line until he figures it out. Like, he's Dylan Cousins, and he's pretty much Dylan Cousins is what's going on. And at least Dylan Cousins shoots, which brings DFS value. Middlestat's not doing that. So I'm out on Colorado 2. I'm in on Colorado 1. It's not great going up against the Sider Edmondson pairing. This is still Colorado 1 though, right? This line, 3.7 expected goals, 3.5 actual goals per 60 minutes. Nathan McKinnon's at like 24 minutes a game again over the last couple weeks, and he's shooting a lot. So, and Billy Husso's in net. Like, yeah, I really do like Colorado. So it's Colorado 1 easily for me, even figuring in the 7K price difference. Like, it's not even close for me. So Colorado 1. I don't mind Detroit 1 here. I assume they're going to leave. Rasmussen was on the power play at morning skate. I assume they're going to leave him there for the game. So it's still a perfectly correlated line at 14,800. If you're not playing expensive Colorado or expensive Edmonton or whatever, I think you do have to consider Detroit, because Colorado's goaltending still not good. Detroit's power play is fine enough. Colorado can struggle on the penalty kill at times, especially clearing out the front of the net. So I don't mind Detroit 1 here, but yeah, obviously I love Colorado 1 the best in this game.
Yeah. I'm trying to, like, in my head, I was like, when you're talking about Georgiev, I'm trying to think of a free agent goalie that really worked out, and I'm struggling to find one besides Linus Ullmark in Boston. Like, that's the only one that comes to mind.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think right now. There's no one else that's really come to mind. Like a free agent, like straight up signing with another team. There's not a lot, man. Normally they're just drafted or they trade for one.
Yeah. Quick party chiming in. Bob won a cup. Did Bob win them that cup? Jacob Trouba won them that cup. Anyway, no, but he did win the cup, but that contract is atrocious. Toronto Maple Leafs. Marner sucks. 3.3 total. Heading into Pittsburgh, the Penguins have a 2.7. Toronto lost last night at home to Washington with Stolarz in net. It will be Joseph Woll. Pittsburgh lost to the Rangers in Madison Square Garden. They flew home. Not a far flight. It was Nedeljkovic last night, so it'll be Tristan Jarry tonight. I think I played Toronto last night. They did nothing. They burned me badly. I think there's a lot of merit to going back to them here tonight. Crosby, Rust, Raquel. Even if they sent out Malkin, O'Connor, Tomasino, like it doesn't even matter who they sent out against the Toronto top line. None of these lines are good defensively. I have no faith in Tristan Jarry. The issue that I'm running into with Toronto 1 in single entry is Edmonton 1 is cheaper and Colorado 1 is not that much more expensive. And Toronto 1 in the list of rankings with Colorado and Edmonton would be number 3. I do think they're going back to them makes a lot of sense. Pittsburgh is terrible defensively. So I don't think I'm going to play them, but I'm not crossing them off because they burned me last night. I'm crossing them off because Edmonton is cheaper in a great spot. Colorado is only $700 more in a great spot. So they're kind of sandwiched in between two other lines that I'd prefer to play. If I was making 5 lineups, I definitely would have Toronto 1. You want to have Toronto 2. Just be aware that Domi could be back. Pacioretty could be back. They activated Pacioretty off IR, so that basically tells me Pacioretty's going to be in. I would wait to see if Domi's in because one of those two probably just slides into Pontus Holmberg's spot on the second line. If it's Pacioretty, I would have some interest in that second line, Tavares, Nylander, Pacioretty. You just have to wait and see your warm-ups. I am very interested in going back to Toronto here. I'm also very interested in Pitt 1 here. Crosby, Rust, Raquel, 19,000, 5.6% projected ownership. Like, Toronto isn't very good defensively. They have a terrible penalty kill. Not that Pittsburgh's power play is any good, but all of Crosby's issues now are defensive. Crosby and Rust still have a ridiculously good offensive sample. So I do have a lot of interest in Toronto 1, Toronto 2, Pittsburgh 1 even Pittsburgh too is a filler. It's just hard to prioritize any of these lines in single entry when you have Edmonton on the slate and Colorado on the slate. It is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I really do like Toronto here. Like, there's nothing wrong with playing them. I will say a couple things. Like, one, I still don't like the 5 forward setup on the power play.
Sure.
I mentioned this elsewhere, but I think with Morgan, like since the start of last season, with Morgan Riley on the top power play unit, they generate it's something like 15% more shots and like 20% more goals than when they don't have them. So when it's OEL or a 5 forward setup, like I just don't know why they don't just go back to Morgan Riley. Maybe they will at some point. I mean, Toronto 1's still a very good line, right? Like, to be honest, after Edmonton, that they might be the best top line on the board, right? Like I think they're probably better than Colorado 1. The difference with them is that everybody from Colorado 1 is probably going to play 22 to 25 minutes, whereas, you know, Nyes will probably play like maybe 17 or 18. Matthews and Marner will be like 20 to 21, but you know, it is a lot of ice time extra that you get with Colorado. You know, that Toronto top line obviously didn't come through last night, but they're still scoring over 4 goals per 60 minutes together this season. The Crosby line's at 3.1 expected goals against. Doing quick math, that's something like 25% worse than the league average. Like, they are just really trading chances. I really do like Toronto's top line. Like I said, what worries me is that they're going to run a 5 forward power play that hasn't really found much success yet. Like, it still haven't had a ton of time together, so maybe they'll give it some more run. They haven't found a lot of instant success with it. And, you know, if they don't have that top 5 power play upside, it's just not worth it compared to Edmonton or Colorado, I don't think. So that's kind of my issue, is like I worry about the actual effectiveness of the power play. And if it's just an average power play, doesn't really give you a whole lot, right? So, or not as much as it should, I should say. So I think Toronto 1 is perfectly fine. I don't think I'm going to be playing them here tonight as a full stack. I do think, like, if you want to just one-off Matthews, I think that's perfectly fine. You know, Nyes is 4,700. It's a little expensive, but I think he makes sense as a one-off in case it's like a low-scoring 3-1 game. He gets a goal and a few shots, and you're happy with that. So I think those kinds of things are fine. As far as full stacking, I'm not sure. Toronto 2 is pretty interesting to me. If Pacioretty is back on that second line, if it's anything else, I'm out. But Pacioretty's only $200 more than Pontus Holmberg right now on DK. So it's basically the same price for the line. You know, 18,100. It's a little steep to stack that much without Matthews, but I think it's definitely playable. On the Pittsburgh side, it's just the top line that I really have interest in. I know Tomasino's done well, and I'm happy to see that he's doing well. That line hasn't been particularly good in their small sample, Tomasino and Malkin. Like, Tomasino, I think he scored once on the power play, and then another one of his goals was on a shift without Malkin. So, like, it's not like that they've been doing a ton of damage together. So it is Pittsburgh 1, 4 expected goals, 2.9 actual goals. The problem is like the Leafs penalty kills actually been getting better. The goaltending's been good. Pittsburgh power play still very bad. Like, I think this is a game where I'm really focusing on the top lines, and I'm going to be honest, I'd rather just pay up and go play Toronto 1 than play Pittsburgh 1 here.
Yeah. Oh, Minnesota Wild with a 2.5 total heading into LA. The Kings have a 3 total. If you're wondering why this is a 5.5 total, I don't know if people are really wondering why this is a 5.5 total, but if you are one of those people going, why this is a 5.5 total, these are 2 of the best defensive teams at 5-on-5. The Kings have the lowest expected goals against per 60 in the NHL. I think the Wild are 3rd or 4th best in the NHL. This is just going to be a tough slug. Like, whoever wins the neutral zone is going to win this game, but it's just going to be a mess. Now, both the penalty kills aren't great, so like there is kind of some stuff to like, I guess, but like I don't know if I'm going to like, there's a lot more ownership than I thought there was going to be in this game. Like there are 4 lines in this game projected over 8%. Now, 2 of them I get because Deneau, Laferriere, Fiala are 12-8, and Fogle, Byfield, Tanner, Jeannot are 8,700. And that line had a great game the other night. I don't really understand the Kings top line being 10%. I don't really understand the Minnesota top line being almost 9%. Like I'll never tell you no to a Kaprizov one-off, but like the lists of people ahead of him in one-off land tonight is pretty long. Like McDavid, Matthews, McKinnon. That's enough in my book to not one-off Kaprizov here. You know what I mean? So like, yes, they had a great night last night, but it was the Ducks. They're going legitimately from the worst defensive team in the league to the best. So in single entry, I'm out on Minnesota 1. I don't really have a ton of interest in Hartman, Johansson, Foligno. So basically in single entry, I'm out on the Wild. Again, you can make a decision what you want to do with Minnesota 1 in MME. They're a great line. So if you want to have some, go for it. The Kings side is a little bit more interesting just from the fact that they're really cheap. I don't have a ton of interest in Kempe Kopitar more. Like it's of the 5-on-5 matchups, it might be the quote unquote best one, but like it's still not great. And for 15-9 at 10%, there's other lines in that range I'd rather play. Fiala, Ferrier, Deneau at 12-8. Like that line has legitimately been nitrous in their small sample. The issue that I'm running into is like Hartman, Johansson, Foligno are really, really good defensively. But again, it's Marc-Andre Fleury in that, not Philip Gustafson. So like, I don't mind playing Fiala, Ferrier, Deneau. Am I going to get there? I'm not sure, but they're on the list of fillers that I have. Fogle, Byfield, Tanner, Jeannot, I don't think I'd full stack. But if you're power play stacking something, I think a one-off Fogle makes some sense. One-off Byfield is fine. Even Tanner Jeannot is fine. I don't think I'd full-on stack Fogle, Byfield, Jeannot. The only line I consider full stacking in this game is Fiala, Ferrier, Deneau.
Yeah, this is a pretty tough matchup. These two teams played about a month ago. They combined for 51 shots. Not a lot of offense, but the Kings did hang a 5 spot on them, and that was against Gustafson. So, like, they can score. I don't have a ton of interest in Minnesota 1 in single entry. Like, the reason being they're going up against Gavrikov and Mikey Anderson. Like, I don't know if anybody's looked at their numbers. 175 minutes together at home, and they take all the tough matchups when they're at home. 175 minutes together, they've been on the ice for 2 goals against. It's absolutely insane how good they've been together. 1.9 expected goals against. Like, they've been one of the best defensive pairs in the NHL this season, at least defensively. So it's a really tough matchup at 5-on-5. Even like the Kings penalty kill, their struggles have been goaltending related, not necessarily the penalty kill itself. And a big thing about the Kings is earlier in the season, they were taking a ton of penalties, right? Like that was a big problem too, is that they were taking 3.5 to 4 penalties per game. I was looking over the last 31 days, that's down to 2.8, which I think is a little bit better than league average in that span. So they're taking a lot fewer penalties. The goaltending hasn't been as bad. It looks like Darcy Kemper is going to be back, though I haven't seen confirmation on that. So I'm out on Minnesota 1. Like, honestly, there's not a lot I really want to stack on the Minnesota side. I think a Marcus Foligno, believe it or not, a Marcus Foligno one-off makes some sense here. He's stone min price, and he's on the top power play unit. So, like, if the Wild can't get there on the power play, maybe he can, like, if he donks an assist and gets a couple shots, like, that's all you really need for 2,500 on DK. So I think a one-off there is fine, but full stacking him out. On the Kings side, it is the Fiala, Laferriere, Deneau line for me. You know, if you do need a much cheaper stack, Fogle, Byfield, Jeannot seems interesting. I will say Akil Thomas got activated off IR. Whether he plays tonight and where he plays, You know, the coach said that they might be going 11-7 again, which would keep Thomas out of the lineup. Or maybe he goes in for Hellenius or something like that. We'll see what happens. But assuming it's Vogel, Byfield, Janot, I think that's fine if you're playing a really expensive Colorado stack or something. But Fiala, Laferriere, Danault have been really good. Danault and Fiala have typically been good together. You know, with Laferriere there, they're at 85 shot attempts for, 36 against per 60. Only played a handful of games together, but pretty good going so far. I don't mind them as a filler. I don't love this game, generally speaking. I'm not sure I'm going to have a stack out of this. I think this is a game where I'll be looking more towards one-offs, you know, in a 3-2-1 stack or something like that, than I will be just like full stacking an even strength line.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it should be a good actual hockey game. But from a DFS standpoint, it's tough to really prioritize it. St. Louis Blues, baby. The 2.5 total. Heading into Edmonton, the Oilers have a 3.9. Edmonton blew the doors off the Blue Jackets the other night, and Edmonton's one price went up $400. I mean, like, push comes to shove. Edmonton 1 is my favorite line of the night. The Blues penalty kill isn't great. They don't take a ton of penalties, and Edmonton hasn't been drawing a ton. But, like, they just need 2 to score 2 power play goals. You know what I mean? Like, Hyman looks like he is alive, which is nice to see. I did see some funny stuff about Hyman's dad and the Ford Nations Cup, but you can go search that on Twitter if you want. I'm in on McDavid, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins. They're my favorite line of the night. There's no reason to hide that. It's not science. It's not surprising. Yeah, they're going to be going out against Thomas Buchnevich neighbors, but, like, it's the Blues. It's the Blues. So I don't see an issue. The top stacks ownership, 17.2% projected. I am willing to wager you in some contests McDavid will be over 30. Again, this is one of those spots I don't really give a crap about the ownership. This isn't Nashville won the Steven Stamkos as the center in 2024. We're 24 days away from 2025, and Steven Stamkos is going to be over 20% on a top line center. Like, this isn't that. Like, I'm completely fine with the high ownership with Edmonton 1 here. I am in on them. Draisaitl, Podkolzin, Kapanen at 13.3 is at least interesting. Like, because you can fit them with Colorado. If you really try hard, you can fit them with Toronto easier, I should say. And Draisaitl, Podkolzin have had very good numbers this season, so I don't mind them at 13.3. But this is really about Edmonton 1. On the Blues side, Thomas Buchnevich neighbors fully correlated at 12,200. I don't really give a crap who they're playing against at 12,200 fully correlated. And they're going to play 19, 20 minutes. You know what I mean? So, like, this is one of those filler lines that I really, really do like. Do I want a game stack? Not really, but, like, they fit with Colorado 1. They fit with anybody, really. So Thomas and Buchnevich historically have very good numbers together. Obviously, they're better with Kyrou, but, you know, Jake Neighbors is not the worst option they can put up there. So they're at least in play for me as a filler. If I play Edmonton, I'm not going to play them, but they would be in play for me if I fade Edmonton. Shen Kyrou also kind of interesting. Like, Edmonton has been getting better defensively, and the goaltending seems to have evened out a little bit, but, like, at these prices for the Blues, like, it's hard not to consider them.
Yeah, I agree with you on St. Louis 1. 12,200 for a perfectly correlated top line where every guy's going to play. Like, Neighbors on the low end at like 17 minutes. Thomas might be at like 20 or 21 for 12,200. Like, I honestly don't really care about the matchup. Like, that seems perfectly fine to me. Because you don't need like a 3-goal game from that line to get value, right? Like, if they can get like 2 goals and 3 assists between them, you're probably going to be fine. So Yeah, they have been good over the last couple of years as well. Like even with Neighbors there, that top line, like I was looking at their numbers going back to last year, 3.8 expected goals, 3.6 actual goals per 60 minutes, and 185 minutes together. Like it's not a massive sample, obviously, but it's not a bad sample either. And the Edmonton goaltending is what it is. Like they have been better. I've been watching the Oilers long enough to know that can fall. Those wheels can fall off that bus real fast. So, yeah, I definitely don't mind going to Thomas Buchnevich Neighbors if you need a stack, a cheap filler stack here tonight. Again, perfectly correlated. Not a ton of ownership, under 6% projected. So I think they're fine. Kyrou, Shen, and Holloway is a little interesting. Like I'm not going to stack them because they're more expensive and not correlated. But, Shen and Kyrou have been able to generate reasonable goals together so far this season. Dylan Holloway, revenge narrative, if you've ever seen one. So, there are reasons to play that line. But, it's St. Louis one that I would much rather play here tonight. All that said, this is an Edmonton game for me. It's funny to say that the Oilers are underperforming and this top line is at 4.1 goals per 60 minutes of 5-on-5. Like that's underperforming. They have been excellent together at 5-on-5. Obviously, Zach Hyman comes back, scores 2 goals on 5 shots in his very first game coming back from injury. The big issue is the power play. I mentioned it this morning on one of the social media sites. Might have been Blue Sky. I can't remember if it was that or Twitter. But anyways, Edmonton's big 4 forwards plus Janmark, all 5 have been there for at least 3 years for the past 3 seasons, and they're drawing something like 25% fewer power plays between them than they typically do. That seems like a huge drop for one season. Not sure if it's the way the team is playing or what's going on, but the team itself isn't drawing a lot of power plays, 2.5 per game over the last 31 days, and they've been at or near the bottom basically all season. So I do worry about getting, 3 or 4 power plays from them here tonight, but they can go 1 for 2 and do a lot of damage at 5-on-5, get an empty net goal, like those types of things. I really do like Edmonton 1 here tonight. Again, they're one of my favorite stacks on the board. So it's both top lines for me. I think if I'm going to the depth, it'd be more looking for one-offs than anything. I really want either the Thomas line or the McDavid line if I'm playing a stack out of this game.
Yep. Also narrative street for Broberg. So let's get to defensemen. Top of the board, Makar, Yossi, Bouchard, Carlson, Sanderson, Clark. It's a good power play matchup for John Carlson. It's a good matchup for Makar and Bouchard. Obviously, Yossi's Yossi. If for Nashville to win this game, like they're going to need Yossi to do some stuff. So, like the top 4 price defensemen, I do have interest in. I probably go Makar 1. Bouchard 2, Carlson 3, Yossi 4. That's just my personal rankings without looking at projections. But I think there is some merit to spending up here tonight. It will be hard if you're using one of the expensive lines. So I think you might see some depressed ownership up there, but I do like them tonight.
Yeah. The stochastic projections, at least for the expensive defensemen, have Makar and Yossi 1-2. Makar 14.8 points, Yossi just under 13, and it's a pretty big gap between them and everybody else. I think it's really good matchups for both. If Nashville is going to score some goals here tonight, Roman Yossi is going to have to get involved because I really don't think like maybe the depth gets a goal. Maybe like Forsberg gets one on the power play or something like that. I don't think the top line is going to fill the net by themselves or something like that. Like Yossi will have to get involved. So I don't mind playing him. If you're not playing the expensive stacks and you want to pay up for Makar, I think that's perfectly fine. It's a great power play matchup for Colorado. So I think that's one thing that kind of might tip the scale in his direction. So I would go Makar, Yossi, then Bouchard. Mid-price range, like Darnell Nurse, still fine. Lane Hudson, still fine. Colton Parayko, somebody to note. Like he might have to block a lot of shots here for St. Louis here tonight, and he's still running the power play. So at his price, I think he's fine. Chychrun, obviously, with the way that he's been shooting the puck. cheap defensemen, like there are a handful of guys that I don't mind here tonight. Obviously, Devin Taves in a really good matchup against Detroit. Chris Letang, I think, is fine, not necessarily a high end. I think the Minnesota blue line is really interesting. I mean, Declan Chisholm still getting like 18 to 20 minutes for sub 3K. Jake Middleton might have to block a lot of shots here tonight facing the Kings. Jared Spurgeon still getting some power play time, and he's under 4K. So, like, I think there are some good values on amongst the Minnesota defensemen here. Evanson fine to play again. Like Gavrikov and Mikey Anderson, they've been playing like 24, 25 minutes for a few weeks now. Like that's a lot of ice time for a really cheap price for those guys. If you need sub 3K, Marcus Pedersen, Alex Carrier, and Rasmus Sandin are the three guys that stood out for me.
Yeah, I also don't mind Philip Broberg.
Yeah.
Especially if you're playing the Blues, because he's played 20 or more minutes 10 of the last 11 games, and the only game he was under, he got hurt. He's on the top pair. He's been involved. Like the shot on goal and block numbers won't blow you away, but for 3,400 on Revenge Street, Narrative Street, I don't mind that. Goalies. Two most expensive goalies, Skinner and Georgiev. Any confidence there? No. Like, I don't mind Joseph Woll at 8,100. Maybe I have the blinders on with Joseph Woll, but like I don't mind him. Darcy Kemper, if he is back and starting, I can stomach clicking him in. UC Saros sticks out like a sore thumb at 7,600. I'm fine with Montembeau as well. That's really about it. Like, there isn't like a super cheap option. I'm gonna go, yeah, man, let's buckle up and play Ville Husso against the Avs here tonight. Like, I just don't want to do it. Don't really want to play Fleury. I guess you could. I just don't have the confidence to do it. So like it's really like Montembeau, Saros, Kemper, and Woll for me. Like you can make a case for Logan Thompson. I don't really want to do that either.
Yeah, it makes me nervous that two of my favorite goalies on the board tonight are the goalies for the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Ottawa Senators. I don't like that.
You know how that movie ends.
Yeah, we know. Yeah, we know how this goes. Yeah, I definitely don't mind Woll either here tonight, or Allmark. Those would probably be the two more expensive goalies that I would play. I think Binnington is fine at 6,900. If Edmonton doesn't get there on the power play, hopefully the Blues can hold them off at 5-on-5. Like, I'm only playing Binnington if I need like a goalie under 7,200, because there's no way I'm playing Ville Husso. That would be basically the only case where I play Binnington. Other than that, I agree. I think Sam Montembeau is probably the cheapest goalie that I would play tonight. After him, it would be going up to Saros at 7,600.
Yeah. Again, like, if you have a goalie you like, you play him. Nothing we can say will make you change your mind. Like, if you love Tristan Jarry tonight, play Tristan Jarry, because goalies are one of the toughest positions to project. Anything can happen on any given night. I haven't looked at the schedule for next week, but I know we'll be back at some point.
We're Monday's only 2 or 3 games or something, but so we're on Tuesday for sure.
Okay, yeah, we'll be back Tuesday. Who you liking for your hat trick pick?
The guy with the jersey right behind you. I'm going Tim Stützle.
Timmy Stu. I'm going to try to avoid like super expensive players here tonight. So I'm going to go Connor McMichael against your Habs.
I mean, I certainly wouldn't bet against it. That's for sure.
Against the line A. But yeah, fun little slate. We'll be back on Tuesday. Good luck, everybody, tonight. And we'll see you next week.
Good luck tonight, everybody.